Greetings, everyone.
I'm back, baby.
It's Jake Ciely.
I'm great. Everybody else sucks.
Oh,
no. It's every nightmare I've ever had.
Excuse me?
It's time to check the link.
Pretty crazy, huh? But it doesn't matter because none of this has anything to do with the show.
You know what? You just made the list!
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in football.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No.
What is up, you ducks? It's been too long. Once a week, and then being off for 1 week is the strangest thing ever. I feel like we haven't done the show in a month at least. And I think, Jeff, you were the last one on, weren't you? Or do we have Meanie? Because I don't even know what the rotation is anymore at this point.
No idea.
It's all over the place. I know, right? But anyway, if you want to check this out, obviously on the FTN Network, head over to the FTN, subscribe. That's where Jeff is. That's where Meanie is killing it, as always, and his hockey bets, except when I make the hockey bets, then I ruin his. I'm sorry, Chris. I do that to you every single year. But also theathletic.com/stillcapitals. Bets TV, you get a first free month if you want to check that out, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, thumbs up, rate, do all that stuff so you can find out more stuff. Heads up right out of the gate, not going to be here next week. We were supposed to be here next week, but the Athletic is sending me to the Combine once again. Jeff, normally there, we normally hang out, get Chick-fil-A with Mike Clay. He's not going, Mike Clay's not going. I'm not sure who else is going to be there. Going to have to hang out with Emery Hunt and Matthew Berry. Are you disappointed, Jeff? Like, for everybody out there that doesn't know, it sounds really cool when we get to go to the Combine, but you know as much as I do, like, it's kind of more fun just hanging out with each other and going to get drinks and talk. Like there's not a whole lot we actually get out of it because we've seen Jeff, you know this. You will get all the information I get sitting at home.
For the most part, yes. You just don't have the opportunity to and this did happen to me at the last Combine. I was walking to the actual gigantic convention room where all the interviews were being held. And I turned a corner and literally bumped face first into Matt Rule, right? And it was right as he was, brand new in the head coaching job. And I was like, oh, Temple University. And then slowly came out of my mouth. And he's like, oh yeah, cool. And then he just walked the other way. You don't have that opportunity at home for sure. And it is the one event. I've been to the NFL draft more times than I can count at this point. The NFL draft doesn't compare. The NFL draft is a fan event. It's not a true football industry event. The Combine is. So if you're like us, you kind of, we're underselling it a little bit. You geek out when you're in the room, especially for the first time. And anybody who is anybody in the football space is there. It's really cool. And then to go to the events at night, to go to just the lobby bar to have a drink. And then you look across and there's Sean McVay. It's just, it's crazy. But, and it's crazy how normal it feels after a little bit too. But, I'll miss it this year, on to next year. I don't know where it's going to be. I keep hearing LA is a possibility. Indy's still a possibility. Dallas is a possibility. So we'll see what they do.
Do you want to lose all of our indie viewers? I hope it's not in Indianapolis.
Oh,
no, there's not a whole lot that the shrimp cocktail, but I mean, you can get that at Costco now. So I mean, it's a lot of fun. We are talking Dynasty today, and that's actually the rookies tie into it. So I'll be at that Combine. We'll be able to talk the week after that. Jeff will be back, so Meanie misses his show. We're still doing a rotation. We're going to cover free agency, by the way, heads up, the 15th, 16th, 17th, 3 shows that week. So make sure you tune into all of those. The one with Meanie is going to be super early because I'm heading to D.C. on the 16th. Bad timing. I'm going to see Olin Rogers live. I was trying to see him before the pandemic hit, and then he's rescheduled, so I can't drive up in the afternoon to D.C. because then I want to make the show in time. But we're glad everybody's back. We're glad Jeff's back. I'm back, and we're going to talk, like I said, Dynasty, Jeff. So right off the top, I want to give you my top 10, and I just want you can jump in on anything. You could say, hey, I think it is deserving to have who you have at number 1. I think you have blank too high. I think you have blank not in the top 10 who should be. But here's my top 10 for everybody out there. Real quick, I didn't want to go too far because, we don't have sweet graphics like Chris Meanie. So, we can. I just forgot to. It's on me. It's on me for not telling them. I should probably have had a graphic for this. But anyway, Jonathan Taylor, 101. Najee Harris, 2. And then we get to the wide receivers. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Yes, I still have Christian McCaffrey at 5. Again, this is Dynasty, so I have a feeling some people might push back on that. Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, Austin Eckler, Cooper Kupp, and A.J. Brown to round up the top 10. There are 4 wide receivers, 6 running backs. Jeff, what are your first thoughts on my top 10?
Well, I mean, I know that you're going to get a lot of hate. I feel for you, with Christian McCaffrey. People are really going to dig their heels in on this one, and I don't think there's really a way to win that battle from a fantasy analyst standpoint. So, whether it's dynasty, whether it's redraft, there's just far too many people out there who are going to say, never going to draft him again. He screwed me, therefore he's dead to me. And actually that creates opportunity. Now, for a redraft, though, if this is redraft dynasty rankings, I do feel very wary about drafting him based on where he is in his career. It's so hard to draft young at running back because there's so few running backs who you can actually draft in a startup who are young and playable. But he's right on that cusp of being almost old enough that you're immediately now looking to trade him away. So that's the one thing there. But he's so tricky to rank. I'm not necessarily faulting the rank more than highlighting the player. Austin Eckler's another interesting one for me, Jake. Yeah. I don't know how much meat is left on the bone there. These guys get so old, you get old so quickly at running back, and that would be my one main concern. Cooper Kupp's actually also not that young, but I don't think you can have him. People don't realize how old he is, but I don't think you can have him outside of the top 10 for sure.
Allen Robinson, younger than Cooper Kupp. Still, that's my favorite thing out there, that it's still insane to think about because it feels like it should be clearly opposite. So Austin Eckler in the top 10, or Austin Eckler even with other running backs included? Like, would you put Kamara, Gibson, Cook, Barkley, Henry, who's actually older than people realize, Mixon, who's younger than people realize? Yeah. Like, would you put any of these running backs over Eckler just in his own right?
Well, I think more, though, it would be like somebody like Cam Akers, because I'm thinking about this from a startup standpoint, right?
Right.
If I'm in a startup draft, because that's really the purpose of dynasty rankings. Like, people always ask me, I don't know if they ask you this, in season, like dynasty rankings. I'm like, no, just use weekly rankings. Make your start decisions, and we'll worry about the rest of this in January. Like, trust me, you do not want me to have to do another set of rankings. I'll get nothing done during the week. So I would think somebody like Akers, or like the decision on like somebody like Antonio Gibson. Where are we on J.K. Dobbins? Maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I really think age has to be a huge factor here as well.
Here's my concern with Akers. You know as much as I do, because we were talking about Akers for a lot of time, just in redraft and seasonal and whatever. I love Cam Akers. I was telling people in redraft who have like 2 or 3, 4 keepers year over years, go check the waivers. A lot of people dropped him. Go stash him for next year, those type of things. But that usage in the playoffs, especially the Super Bowl, concerned me a little bit. Like, we don't know for sure, like, what's the depth chart next year? Is Sony Michel even back? But, like, even if not, like, are we looking at Akers in the McVay use that we used to know, where it's 70%-ish of the workload? Or are we going to be dealing with this kind of game script, game plan dependent, where we see some Darrell Henderson 50-50 type? I'll give you an example. Are we headed towards a Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson type of situation next year, where it could be game in and game out? And I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm saying this is my concern, is that might happen next year with Sean McVay.
So McVay a checkery. I don't know that. I don't know if that's his MO, and that's I mean, I definitely don't want to just toss that notion to the side. It definitely has to be a concern, the usage there compared to the usage in the playoffs last year. Granted, he didn't have a 4-game run last year, but he was heavily used, and it seemed like the stage was set for that usage to continue. But I look at it from an age standpoint, and that really is kind of where I might lean that direction. And this shows you the fluidity of rankings. Other people might want to build a dynasty roster in a slightly different way. Hey, Jay had a question here in the chat, though, about Christian McCaffrey's wear and tear. And Jake, this is something we talked about during the season, comparing to Saquon Barkley, where Saquon Barkley, it didn't look the same. And I don't know if that was just a product of a team that, you know, obviously, hey, they rolled their coach out there. You know, it's going to be a new regime. How does that look this year? He was still getting his legs underneath of him. But McCaffrey, yes, wear and tear. But you know what? Every single time he's on the field, he is absolutely excellent. So that's where you balance. And this is where you might be able to get a discount on him, both in Dynasty and in redraft. And if he does stay healthy, not for all 17 games, but let's say McCaffrey plays 13 of 17. Jake, where do you think he finishes in fantasy scoring next year?
13 is it? 5th?
Yeah, somewhere
Fourth?
elite, basically, right?
Let's go back to Le'Veon Bell when he was suspended for 4 games. He still finished as the RB3 and RB1 in points per game. Because that's always a reference point that I'll use and sometimes say, like, if we knew a suspension headed into the season. Or it was actually my argument for Saquon Barkley this last year. It was saying is why I would still take him as a back in RB1 because you can more easily make up the beginning of the season for those 3 or 4 games. And when you factor in the replacement running back plus the 12 games, you're getting the RB1. So, and Christian McCaffrey, and I'm not coming for Jay. Jay's great, by the way. G-Men Jay in the fantasy space as well. He started out as a listener years ago. Kudos to him for the drive to get to where he is. But wear and tear, I think wear and tear is the wrong way to say it. Like, injuries, yes, but that doesn't make it wear and tear. Wear and tear, he's actually not had a lot because he hasn't been playing games. So it's like wear and tear is more like 300, 350 touches. It's the injuries, and what I'll always reference is this one. Leonard Fournette, injured in college, first year, second year, and then he wasn't injury prone. And I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey can't get hurt next year, but injury prone and injury plagued is something that I broke down with Joe Pisapia at one point. Injury prone would be like, I keep suffering a soft tissue, hamstring, thigh, quad, quad's the same thing, but like that's injury prone because you're starting to have the same recurrence. Injury plagued is like Christian McCaffrey or even Barkley. Barkley's ankle injury when he stepped on the back of the player's ankle, like it had nothing to do with being injury prone. He's just plagued. So I think that's a good distinguation. Did I just make a word? Distinguation.
There you go.
Wordsmith. Wordsmith over here. So what are your thoughts on that to break it down that way, Jeff?
So wear and tear, Derrick Henry, or probably the pinnacle of wear and tear workload, Ezekiel Elliott. Like, it's not surprising he played through injury this year. Injury prone, I wrote down Tyler Eifert.
Yes.
Like automatic. You're like, it's not a matter of if, but when. And unfortunately, some of these guys, I think, are concussion prone as well, based on the way they play. We like Jordan Reed, we saw over and over and over again, which then it becomes very scary. End of his career. Yeah. I would agree with that. And I think some of these, Christian McCaffrey goes back out there. This was not in 2021, but in 2020, has an excellent game and then gets like a fluke injury right away. Like it's not a wear and tear issue with him at all. And if anything, it may help him out. From a longevity standpoint, being that he didn't have all that extra wear and tear, right?
Yes. Distinguish and distinction combined is distinguation. That is the Jake word of the month. Month's almost over. Hey, real quick, before we get out of top 10 and get to some of these positions, I was interested to see this one. I got you said Christian McCaffrey. I expected the Christian McCaffrey. There was even somebody in the joke that said, interesting rank on Christian McCaffrey because I don't know if you know he retired. Like jokes like that. The one I got the pushback on that I was surprised by, nobody mentioned Eckler. Nobody said anything about Kupp or A.J. Brown who's had injuries or anything like that, or even Najee Harris at number 2. It was Javonte Williams. And I got a couple comments, and there was one who got, this comment was, at number 5 or 6 overall, if I can get that, I'm selling him immediately. And people were thumbs upping it, like saying the same thing. And I was like, oh, really? This is remind you last year, that's about where we, as in Jeff, me, a lot of the people in the fantasy community, were dynasty ranking Jonathan Taylor. So I'm assuming you didn't say his name either. I'm assuming you're with me on this and think that person's crazy, and I'm not the crazy one.
I mean, honestly, I have him as my number 4 running back. I have Swift one spot ahead of him because if Swift, if it all comes together, that dude could have a monster year this upcoming season. But no, I don't have any fault in that whatsoever. Maybe people are not taking into account the value in a startup draft of having a second-year running back who is young, who is coming off a very impressive season where he split time with a 29-year-old, now still good 29-year-old, but a 29-year-old running back. That is going to end. And then we're talking about a Denver team that literally is one quarterback away from possibly being in the next Super Bowl. If they get that guy. And I know people might even think that's outrageous. No, not Garoppolo. But the defense is on point. The offense, talent at every level across the board, they just did not have a quarterback. And we just saw a team who went out and got a pretty good quarterback, not even an elite level quarterback, and won a Super Bowl with great surrounding talent and a very impressive defense. So I don't think it's that outlandish.
Garoppolo's been to 2 Super Bowls. By the way, Jeff, you need to come up with a word now because Jiggles brought this up. Stepmom Lauren came up with affirmity. So we've got distinguation and affirmity. Like at some point, you got to come up with a word. Chris doesn't count because he's got his own words because he lives in Canada. So by the way, shout out to everybody watching in Canada. As I joke, all of you as a nation. Hey, beat us. I believe they finished in front of the United States in medal count, I believe. Which, by the way, Mr. Nice Guy, you're welcome. Thank you. I forgot to check the Super Bowl. I'm going to pull it up as he's saying this. Yes, they destroyed the over on the 5.5 sacks. That was one of the easiest bets. Hold on. I had the running tally. The only one left I had to tally in here was the Cooper Cup receptions versus gold medals.
And it was
for
8
the United
gold medals.
States.
I looked it up. It was
a tie. It was a tie. It was a push.
All right.
Do you know this United States was sitting on 8 for like the last 4 days too? Like they just needed one more to get past it, so it was a push. Which means, Jeff, Chris Meany is the winner.
There you
Chris
go.
Meany at 12. I would have hit 12 and tied him if the medals hit, but I didn't. And so 11, 10, and then sorry, Lauren, you're way in the back at 7. Went a little too different. I actually made a late run with like the thing that helped me was the one for blue on the color of the Gatorade, and then there was something else really late that I got too. So the Atlanta Hawks points versus Cup yards, like that one. So like I got a couple of like the late random stupid ones. But yeah, so kudos to Meany. He wins. But yes, anybody who took over the 5.5, which by the way you got on one team alone. So there you go. Let's talk quarterbacks, Jeff. I want to talk real quick before we get to players. What's your strategy if you're starting a draft? And not super flex, super flex a whole world of its own, especially in Dynasty. Let's just say Dynasty 1 quarterback. How early do you try to get your guy? Because you can look at it and say, if I get an Allen or Mahomes, I don't have to think about quarterback for potentially 10 years. And then you have the flip side of it where, you know what? Well, then I'll get 2 guys in the Tannehill, whatever range, and that's fine because I'll play. What's your general strategy if you're starting a brand new Dynasty draft?
It's not quite as late round quarterback as my redraft strategy, which is just straight up, unless there's somehow some insane value that fell in the middle rounds, it's always late round. But that's because my player pool is smaller. So, for example, Aaron Rodgers is not even on my Dynasty Startup draft board. I don't care where I am in the draft. I'm not going to draft him because I'm going to have to turn around and trade him away. Even somebody like Russell Wilson and Stafford, guys who are in their mid-30s, I'm really not interested in those guys, even with the longer shelf life that quarterbacks have. I do want to nail somebody who I can have for hopefully a decade. So, I'm not looking in the Allen, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Kyler, Lamar, Dak, that type of range. But I am going to be very interested in some of the other guys out there, the younger guys. If I can get seemingly you can get Jalen Hurts on a discount everywhere. I don't know why, but you can.
Oh my God, I was going to bring him up.
I'd be inclined
Trevor
to
Lawrence.
go that route. I'd be inclined, if I can get a very big discount in a startup today, to take Desean Watson. And no, please stop. Don't tweet me. Don't ask me. No, actually, given the timeline, I don't think he is traded before the NFL draft. He may not even be fully deposed until after April 1st, given now the current timetable of events that is expected to happen both on the civil and criminal side. However, I do think he will play football again. And even if it's not in 2022, in a startup draft, to take a massive discount on a guy who, yes, he'll eat up a bench spot for a year. I got plenty of bench spots in a dynasty league. I will take that risk. As long as I have somebody who can get me through this year, I'd be more than willing to do so. And then, some of those guys like that you get really cheap who aren't exactly young, but, like a Derek Carr or something like that. I don't have an issue with getting a guy like that just in the short term to get me through in case somebody like Hurts, who I would grab earlier, doesn't pan out.
I don't get the discount on Hurts. I obviously get the discount on Trevor Lawrence, but it's starting to come back around now that they've essentially cleaned the coaching staff out. Well, they got rid of Urban Meyer. That's the biggest thing. So that's a big one, but you're right. And the discount's coming more for Hurts. And I just don't understand it because I keep banging this drum, and I'm assuming you're with me on this, is like, I keep looking at him. I said, he's going into his third year. He's going into essentially his 2.5 of being a starter, really 2 of the offense being designed for him. And he's going down a very similar path to that Baltimore guy, Lamar Jackson. No, he doesn't run for 1,100 yards, but it's fantasy. I don't care if he only completes 58% of his passes. I care to see the 800 rushing yards at the end of the season. And we're talking about a guy who is dealing with a deep threat who needs another wide receiver across from him in his rookie year in Devonta Smith, and one of the biggest draft busts at receiver in the past time with Jalen Reagor, who lost his job to like a bunch of also-rans at wide receiver. You just give him some talent around him, and again, another year of this offense being designed for. I am so in. I'm buying Jalen Hurts everywhere. I'm in a league where I traded Jalen Hurts because he was my third quarterback. So as a dynasty startup, Jeff, I hit this 2 years ago. This is amazing. I have Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts was my third quarterback. So I traded Jalen Hurts because I had no tight end, because that's the one area I lost, and the one that I forget who it was, but he got hurt. But anyway, this is the point being, I traded him for Tannehill and tight end help. I'm going back trying to get Hurts back now, because I could probably trade Tannehill straight up for Hurts at this point, and I think that's absurd.
It really is. And with the Philadelphia Eagles sitting with 3 picks in the middle of the first round, almost back-to-back, it's very close. They have 2 back-to-back. They're all but, I think they're like a stone cold lock to take a wideout with one of those 3 picks.
100%.
And this year's class, yet again, another really interesting class.
Burks,
this is like
London. I mean, there's a couple guys you could throw in there immediately.
Such a diverse class too, so you can really kind of tailor, you custom pick the guy that you think.
I think Jamison Williams is the one that doesn't make sense because he's too much like Devonta Smith. But like the Burks or London or
so if you Traylon Burks in there like that could do it. That could do it.
Who's potentially for anybody that doesn't know, what is he, 6'3", 6'4", 250? He's basically DK Metcalf as like a body. That would be. I'm with you on Jalen Hurts. So then you kind of touched on buys and sells at quarterback. So then 2 things real quick: Allen versus Mahomes. Who are you taking? And is it a coin flip? I mean, honestly, like, because I got pushback when I said I could go either way, and so I'd be like, oh, it should be so easy, Allen, at this point.
It should. How many 5,000-yard seasons does Allen have? Did I miss that? How many 50 passing touchdown seasons does Allen have? Did I miss those? Come on, man. The simple notion that Patrick Mahomes had a down year, and look at the numbers. It was almost a 5,000-yard season. He's like mid to high 30 touchdown passing seasons are going to be like the baseline for him every year.
We get some funny stuff, Jeff. I mean, I got somebody who's like, this wasn't even Dynasty. This was 2022 way too early ranks, and I had Kupp at number 1 at wide receiver. And like, I'm worried that Kupp is coming off a career year. I said, oh, really? Do you know if you took 20% of his production, 20% of his production, he's barely behind Debo as the number 2 wide receiver. If you take this, Jeff, if you take 40% away from Cooper Kupp, he finishes behind Deontay Johnson as wide receiver 9. If you take away all of his touchdowns, 0 touchdowns, he still finishes inside the top 10. I don't care if it's career year. Chill out. Cooper Kupp, ridiculous. One last thing before we get to running backs. If you had to pick one in Dynasty, this is just kind of your opinion. Murray, Herbert, I know you said you skipped this range, but if you had to pick one, Murray, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Burrow, Dak, if you want to throw Lance, somebody else in that conversation. If you had to pick one that wasn't the Allen or Mahomes, who would be like your guy?
Probably Burrow, just because I think the ceiling is that high. I think he will have a 5,000-yard passing season pretty soon. He does need to straighten out some of the bumps in the road, and I think that people are going to have to remember that. I kept pointing it out, like, okay, he won a lot of folks their leagues. Those folks also barely made it into their playoffs because of him as well. And they were calling into my show complaining incessantly about him in like week 11. And then all of a sudden, okay, he's great. And then the Super Bowl, and that's now in our memory, and we're forgetting the middle part of the season. So he needs to straighten that out. But the ceiling with that offense, with those weapons, especially the next few years, is really appealing. I mean, it's close. The Murray thing is interesting. They did adjust the betting odds on will he be week 1 starter, but it's still minus 500. But yeah, I think I would just lean Burrow ever so slightly. It's so close with those guys. It's an interesting range of quarterbacks.
Yeah, and you want to talk about like the whole injury thing too. If you want to, I think it was Ian Hartitz that tweeted it out and said that if you take the healthy games of Kyler Murray, he's QB1, period. And
not even close. Yeah, not even close.
It just destroys everybody else,
Yeah.
like over Allen, over Mahomes. So, but I think that's the interesting part is like you could say now he's kind of like the Christian McCaffrey of quarterbacks, like at this point. Let's talk running backs. And Brandon just mentioned it, a good sleeper is Barkley. I don't even think necessarily a sleeper depending on who you're talking to, but I think he's a value right now in Dynasty. I think he's a value in redraft if you have a few keepers because of this, Jeff. You brought him up before. Dan Dugan for The Athletic mentioned, he talked about one of the games where he got tripped up, and he said he got tripped up, he was just about to hit second gear, and he said old Christian McCaffrey is already hitting second gear, and that doesn't happen. And then we had Inside Injuries who said at the beginning of the season was this kind of injury recovery, don't expect the real Barkley until 2022. That being said, I pushed back on that one a little bit because I think if we were all watching at the end of September, maybe not 100%, but he felt like 95 and he was getting close. And then he had the ankle sprain, and that's where he never came back 100% from. And that's where he never got that second step back. Barkley, this is assuming a lot, but finished out the year healthy. He's got an entire offseason. Everybody assumes the Giants are going to take an offensive line with one of the first 2 picks in the first round, attack the offensive line in general for next year. Saquon Barkley, is he a value? Is he a buy for you? He's a stone cold buy for me. Like he's inside. I think I have him at 9 or 10 for running backs in Dynasty, let alone redraft. I have him at 10, sandwiched between Cook and Mixon. You could go either way on that. If you want to say Mixon, he's somebody I'm actually injury prone concerned about. And I know he just came off a healthy year, but there's a lot of dings on his resume. But anyway, where are you on Barkley?
It's tough to draft a running back heading into his 6th year too on Mixon, which that's challenging, man.
And they weren't using him in the passing game. They kept bringing in P. Ryan.
Yeah, which P. Ryan, like coming into the league, you're like, that dude's a 2-down runner, right? Like I just don't get teams sometimes. I am so glad that that we saw in Vegas down the stretch that Josh Jacobs was actually used as a 3-down back because that's what he should be. But I don't get it. Barkley though, I'm at 13. My main concern is just the overall state of the team. How quickly can they turn that around, and will it be turned around before it's too late? I do think they turn it around. There are component pieces there that are solid, and Dable is obviously highly respected for what he can do on the offensive side of the ball. But I can't be bullish in Dynasty. That being said, in redraft, I love to take advantage of when people are fearful of players or angry at players if they don't want to be called fearful. And there's going to be a lot of that about Saquon Barkley. And I just hope he falls and falls and falls because I'll scoop him up every opportunity I can if it's a good value.
Yeah, and so, Brandon, you're actually wrong. His ankle injury had nothing to do with the previous injury. He stepped backwards on a defender and rolled his ankle. It was a freak injury, so it had nothing to do with the other injury. So there you go. Clarification for everybody out there. And if you have other people that don't know the Barkley and the situation, Henry, speaking of which, does he fall into that quarterback conversation with like Aaron Rodgers where I don't even want him because now I'm immediately looking to trade him because not only the wear and tear, but he's another one. I don't think people realize that Derrick Henry is 28 years old. He's older than people think because the first year, especially, and then kind of the second year, he wasn't really in our minds.
Yeah. Not a consideration. I want to stay at or under 25 years old. But the one exception being when you have some of these guys who come in younger. Zeke came in a little bit younger. Mixon came in a little bit younger. Nick Chubb's tricky because 26 is when I start to look to trade guys away. So when I'm drafting or when I'm managing a dynasty roster, I'm thinking in 2 windows this year because I do want to be competitive. I never want to be in a full rebuild mode. And then the next 3 years. So I think of Nick Chubb right now. In 3 years from now, will he be a viable starter for me? I don't know. I don't think he will be, and it's not a knock on him. So when I say something like that, the immediate reaction is that, how could you say that about him? I love Nick Chubb. I think he is pound for pound one of the best early down runners of this generation. He is so much stinking fun to watch, but I also have to run a dynasty team. And I think that now I'd have to draft him and basically trade him away, which why not just draft somebody younger? That gives me a little bit longer of a runway. So I wouldn't completely take Chubb off of my board, but the likes of Derrick Henry, like now he's past the expiration point, unfortunately. And I can't draft guys like that.
Yeah. Could you imagine if Nick Chubb never exploded his knee in college? Like, it's just, for everybody that doesn't remember or doesn't know, his knee went like 18 ways from Sunday. Like, legit, was it it was 3 ligaments, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was like 3 out of 4.
The dreaded triple. Yeah.
So you already mentioned Akers. So we have the returning Akers of this year, but now going to be 100% healthy. We have the assumption of Dobbins being ready. We have the assumption of ETN, who said he's 80%. I always love when they throw out percentages. Feeling 80%. So what's the 20%? I don't know. But by the way, I don't think he's even running yet. He was only not even jumping around a few weeks ago. Wasn't out of a seating position. But anyway, that being said, Akers, Dobbins, ETN. Confidence level on, are you trying to buy any of them? It sounds like you are. Akers at least. What is your I guess, how are you valuing them in Dynasty right now?
Well, if you're saying not in a startup draft and you're saying I could buy one of those guys, the easy answer for me is ETN, because he's got the lowest overall perception thanks to Robinson, who has actually hurt himself, and the uncertainty of the situation. But a guy who last year a lot of people were considering, essentially one of the top rookies, before all the injuries happened at the position. This year, you're getting him for cents on the dollar. So absolutely, I still buy in on the talent. And people get angry at me when I say that entering the league, especially, and just from a pedigree standpoint, ETN is superior, vastly superior to James Robinson. Vastly superior. You're talking about a player with
I thought you were going to say Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So there you go.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess. Well, they're different types of players. I know. Actually, ETN would be really fun in Kansas City, because I view him as Jamal Charles skill set, where he's a little bit more of an angular body build, but he's got the speed and he has that ability to take those plays, between the tackles, second level, bounce outside, and then off to the races. He has the skill set as a receiver. I had somebody, people are now trying to pigeonhole him as a receiver. Somebody was trying to tell me, oh, well, he's basically Deebo Samuel. And it's like, no, he's not. No, not even close. Deebo Samuel is an offensive weapon, wide receiver who can do everything for you. ETN is a running back. He's a modern running back. Whatever Urban Meyer said, we just have to forget about.
We can pull the Deebo with it. So we have a wide back. So he'd be a running out. Is that what he would be?
Wide back. Thank you, Kyle Shanahan, for that one.
So here's an interesting one that I want to ask you then. So now we have not just the injury guys. ETN is also a second year. Some second year running backs. We have Elijah Mitchell going to next year. We have Michael Carter, Damian Harris. I guess we can include Ramondre Stevenson. But I think I'm assuming you're going to agree he's not even in this discussion for these three. Where are you feeling you could almost, if you want, rank these three. Tell me your opinion on Mitchell, Carter, and Harris as a whole. I actually think, as of today, that's my ranking, Mitchell, Carter, Harris. If I was going ceiling, I'm going to go Carter above all of them. And also, you want to talk about somebody who's got a lot of draft capital. The Jets have a hell of a lot of draft capital. The Jets could be one of those teams that, I think somebody said it, so I don't want to say I'm the one that came up with this, because I'm probably echoing other people who've said the same thing. But if you want who's the next year's Bengals, call me crazy. And I'm not even a Zach Wilson fan. But if you're talking about the talent that's there and the talent that they drafted last year and the draft capital they have for this year, I could see the Jets making that. Now, I don't think the Jets win the division. I don't think the Jets make the Super Bowl. Hell no. But could they be that top 5 draft pick to all of a sudden potential playoff team? Yes, and that's part of it. So Mitchell, Carter, Harris, how do you feel about them? And then again, if you want to include Stevenson in this conversation because he's relevant to Harris's situation.
Well, and that's the challenge, right? So I think Carter just a tick ahead of Mitchell, just because I do see more of that 3-down profile that I want to believe that Mitchell has that next year, but we saw it was sporadic. Some games, yes. Some games, absolutely no this year. They do need to draft offensive line. You can't just say, all right, well, we got Mekhi Becton and then all is right with the world.
Talk about injury prone.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to address the position, or just the positions plural across the offensive line. You need to really put Zach Wilson in position for success in an offense that, in theory, should have that success. I mean, an offense that, in theory, should be very conducive to doing a lot of the same things that Elijah Mitchell is doing, because it's a very similar offense, right?
Oh, what a surprise, right?
Yes.
Robert Saleh.
But they're right back. They're back to back. Well, and it's LaFleur's brother too. So,
Yeah.
it's all of that. So they're right back to back in my rankings. And there is a gap to Harris. Harris is going to be really challenging. And it's really the presence of Ramondre Stevenson. If it was, well, Ramondre Stevenson's 28 years old and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then I'd be a lot more bullish on Harris. But he's not 20. He's going into his second year. I just think there's going to be frustration with that backfield. And we know how well fantasy players deal with frustration. Just not one that I'm looking for as much. So the Carter and Mitchell, definitely RB2 candidates for me in dynasty startups. Harris probably more of a risk reward RB3 in my rankings.
Okay. ETN versus those three.
Oof.
Because this is the situation we're heading into. I'm easily taking Carter over ETN.
Yeah.
But I think ETN versus Mitchell and ETN versus Harris gets interesting.
It's pretty easy for me to go ETN, just the implied value over Harris.
Okay.
Ooh, it's tough with Mitchell. Technically speaking, now you're making me look at my rankings really closely. Technically speaking, do have him a one spot ahead, and then Carter's one spot ahead of that.
Okay.
But man, that's close. It's a pick your poison of the known commodity and the unknown commodity.
It's the devil you know versus the one that you don't. The cliche of all cliches. And I think that also comes down to roster construction. If we're talking dynasty at this point, and the way we're talking about it right now, we're talking trades, is your team. Whether you can absorb that ETN hit, or, do you want to go for the value, or do you want to try and think I'm going to win 2022? Again, as Jeff said, I'm 100% love to hammer this point home in dynasty. At some point, you might fall into needing a rebuild just because maybe you just had so many injuries, trades, free agents, teams can blow up in a heartbeat, even if you plan ahead. That being said, you never want to 100% end up in the rebuild position because you have no chance of winning for an entire year. So,
or more than that.
That's true.
I've seen rebuilds last 3 or 4 or 5 years, depending on how bad the situation is.
New York Giants.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Nope.
All right. I'm going to skip wide receivers. We have to looking at the clock.
Well, can I make one point real quick on Deebo Samuel?
No, you can't. No, go ahead.
Because we brought him up earlier. I've historically called Derrick Henry's production the Derrick dilemma, because the games where he has 20 carries for 95 yards, no touchdown, no catches, he's a bad fantasy asset right that week. Well, now Deebo has the newly coined Deebo dilemma. If Deebo Samuel has 10 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown, that's 12 points, and he has one catch for 12 yards. All right, now we're at 14.2 PPR points. That's not a top 10 wide receiver most likely that week.
Right.
And if that happens a lot, and I don't mean a lot as in 15 times, but a lot as in 6, 7, 8 times, which it kind of basically did this year, all of a sudden people are drafting this guy as a top 5 fantasy wideout. And there's going to be a lot of weeks where you're not getting. Now, and of course, I'm not suggesting that everybody should have Cooper Kupp's floor, but that could be very, very, very frustrating from a draft capital standpoint. And it is something that I think we need to consider, because you mentioned it, the wide back. Shanahan has made it abundantly clear. This is not going to go away. He's going to be, he's so effective that they'd be foolish to not do it. So Deebo can go out and have a great NFL game that is only really a wide receiver 2 fantasy game. So it's a dilemma.
I definitely agree. I think that he's one of the best sell highs because people are going to give the moon and the stars for him right now.
Yep.
In redraft, because we're not really talking that today, but let's talk about it real quick. I have Kupp, Adams, Jefferson, Chase all in front of him definitively. Yeah. And I think that's the tier. I think he falls into that next tier with A.J. Brown and Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill, who's actually not great consistent wise, and depending on what happens with Chris Godwin, but I think he's in there, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing.
He is, and I want people to continue to believe that Stephon Diggs did not have a good season. People are so nuts, man. The numbers were great. Like, he had another very, very good season, and I will take him gladly at a slight discount if that's the widespread perception. Like, guys, just draft Gabe Davis over him. Just please do that. But yeah, he's in that tier, and honestly, probably I might have to really look closely at projections. The problem, Jake, is like right now, and I'm sure you might be similar to me. I don't know your process, but I just do rankings right now. Whereas once we get to the NFL draft, my projections start the process as opposed to me just sort of using my subjective take. And once we start to put those numbers in there and see what it actually looks like with Deebo Samuel getting a pretty healthy workload as a running back, that could change things. I'm just not willing to do it right now. For anybody watching right now, I don't know what these rosters are, and I don't build projections from the bottom up. I build them from the top down. So team level first down to the players in terms of shares, not the other way around. So I just simply can't do it, you know?
You mean I can't have my receivers totaling 5,700 yards and the team only throwing for 4,600? I can't do that?
What? Everybody sees 190 targets on the team or whatever. Yeah.
Everybody. Before we get to tight ends real quick, is there any other running back that you want to buy low or sell high on right now before we hit the offseason?
Let me look at my list. I mean, yes, of course.
You can't say Zeke because nobody wants him right now for good reason. I'm trying to think, like, if people are down on Aaron Jones finally.
I might want to sell if people want to buy Rashad Penny if I still have shares of him. If people are like buying it on the end of the season, I mean, you're not selling obviously as high as some of the top names, but when I scrolled down, he's definitely one of the names that stands out. People have short-term memories, and if they really do think that he's going to be the guy, maybe I'm wrong in selling, but ultimately my goal is to replenish roster spots with younger players. So if I can sell him for picks in a rookie draft right now, my rookie draft's in May, I get those picks or a pick even, and now I can turn Rashad Penny, who has been a disappointment, into a younger player who might be a future disappointment, but might also be a future contributor. I'm going to do it.
I'll give you one that might be a little bit out there, but it's super cheap. But I'm buying Gus Edwards. Like, okay. I love J.K. Dobbins. Love him. You know I love him. I had him in the top tier when he came out of college. But everybody's just assuming, boom, dead, ready for week 1, 100% healthy, no questions asked, going to get all the workload. When he went down, where was everybody doing with Gus Edwards? Like, now all of a sudden nobody wants Gus Edwards anymore. I'm like, I mean, I'll take him for nothing if you're going to willingly get rid of him. So first off, Jeff, I know you have to agree with me on this one, because the entire world sat there and told me, actually, including Monday night, I went out with some guys to Dirty Buffalo. It's a local Buffalo Wings place with people from Buffalo. That's why it's called Dirty Buffalo. But great place. And had somebody tell me, Jeff, Kyle Pitts is not a top 5 tight end yet because he doesn't score touchdowns.
Oh,
and I wanted to flip the table. I was losing my mind. But I told him, I said, like, look, you're officially out. I was like, you can't come to me in 2 years and be like, oh, I'm on the Kyle Pitts train. Like, nope, too late. You dead right now said it. Number 1 dynasty tight end is Kyle Pitts. Are you with me?
You know, many years ago, this is a long time ago, when I mentioned a player,
he's 21. Anyway, go ahead.
Calvin Johnson. Like, his first year or whatever was disappointing. And I remember being at a draft, I put a sticker on the board, and the guy who had him last year, good luck with that one. You know how that goes. And then it's Calvin freaking Johnson. I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts is Calvin Johnson, but I'm saying the perception that year 1 and only touchdowns matters is such a backwards viewpoint. He was arguably the greatest rookie tight end in history this year. And I know Mike Ditka, all right, different era though. But the season was spectacular at a position that is notoriously difficult. Like Pat Freiermuth, by the way, shout out to him, because notoriously difficult to hit the ground running in your rookie season and produce. And he did so. And he put up the 1,000-yard season. And okay, whatever the touchdowns, but you know, the projections, which when we put those out, you know, I probably had him like 800 yards. I don't remember what my exact number is. And people were saying that was crazy. And he exceeded that by 200 plus yards. He's the number 1 dynasty tight end. It's not close.
I'm glad you're 100% with me on that one. And then the question I have for you, because this one's interesting. This is now age versus somebody who could be argued starting, question mark, to get injury prone. If you're doing a startup dynasty, so everybody knows what Kelce brings you. And it's tight end. So you're a little bit more willing to bite that bullet on it being, you know what, I get 3 years of elite production, but it's Travis Kelce. If it comes down to Kittle 28, Kelce 32, Kittle's got some injury history versus Kelce might only give you 2 or more 3 years. Which one do you go with? Do you go Kittle or Kelce in Dynasty right now?
Can I just take Mark Andrews and not take either one?
Well, yeah, Mark Andrews is number 2. This is why we dropped down to 3 and 4.
All right. I try to button hook you. I'm going to take Kittle. I'm going to take the age. Unfortunately, in Dynasty, that's going to have to be a consideration. And while tight end age it's not as much a part of the equation as it is at running back is the main. And then at wide receiver as well is a big part of the equation in startups. I still do have to consider it. Kittle can be dominant at times. He, does have a bit of the injury stuff, but in that offense, I'm really intrigued to see what this thing's going to look like going forward. And I think there's still the potential for more big things and more years. So that's why I'm going to stick with him.
Yes, and thank you, Jiggles. Yes, 100% Air Fryermuth. I was going to bring up the point that I have him at number 7, right after Hawkinson, in front of Dallas Goddard, who at this point are like, I'm done with Dallas Goddard. Like, stop. I get what he is, and this is what he is. Like, stop trying to make him more. Like, this is, enough with Dallas Goddard. Is going to be the next top 4 tight end. It's done. It's over, at least for me. I actually even had the only thing that kept me from Fryermuth even above Waller at 29. Remember, Waller's late to the game. And potentially even Hawkinson. I'm not ready to go that far, but if I knew the quarterback, and hell, you want to talk about a trade possibility. By the way, Jeff, you'll remember this, and Jeff remembers, and I don't know how many of your viewers remember, but from day one, where did I say Desean Watson was going to get traded to? I said the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who did they just hire? Brian Flores. They're opening this door. I'm telling you, if it happens, and Desean Watson is the quarterback, Pat Fryermuth, boom, I'll put him at number 5. It's happening.
Did you just go Charlie Day on us from Always Sunny? You're like, I don't know if they make that big of a splash. I don't know, but I had Watson going to Tampa, so we'll see.
Connecting the dots. All right, before we get out of here,
about Noah Fant, though, by the way. Shout out with him.
If he has a real quarterback.
Yes. Aaron Rodgers, right?
Oh, then I could actually get on Noah Fant for that reason. I haven't been on Noah Fant to this point, but that would actually get me involved. Hell, the wide receivers, which we'll talk about the show after next week. Reminder, next week I'll be at the Combine. Jeff will be enjoying his couch, but missing on the good times, missing on bumping into these players and coaches and stuff like that. A buy, I got to tell you, my buy is Irv Smith, because people forgot how good he is because of his missed season. They've already, he's out of their mind and completely forgotten about it. It's hard to find a buy tight end. I don't want to take yours in case you could just tell me, is Cole Kmet yours?
Well, if it's not Big Irv, then yeah. I mean, Big Irv's the obvious
0
answer.
touchdowns.
Yeah. Outside of that, I mean, I think Troutman could be interesting too, but you're really digging once you get outside of the established guys, and you almost have to get lucky. It stinks, but that's the nature of tight ends.
You do. Hey, Evan Ingram, maybe he ends up on a capable offense. It's happening
Evan
again.
Ingram, man, I wish I knew how to quit
18
you.
excuses. Yeah, I know. Every excuse in the book. He's Rashad Penny of tight ends. That's what he is. He's the Rashad Penny of tight ends.
He is.
Jeff Ratcliffe, one of the best of the fantasy world. So make sure you're following at Jeff Ratcliffe. Make sure you check him out on FTN and all his great American work. I don't know where that came from.
Born in the USA, baby.
Amazing work. SiriusXM award-winning show. So check that out. Or everything at FTN, theathletic.com/betstv, all capitals. Get your first free month, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. We love you guys. See you later.